Here we have question 24 for the January 2017 Common Core Algebra 1 Regents, and this is the last question of the multiple choice, so as you might expect, it is a bit more difficult. So let's take a look. The 2014 winner of the Boston Marathon runs as many as 120 miles per week. During the last few weeks of his training for an event, his mileage can be modeled by m of w is 120 times 0.90 to the w minus 1, where w represents the number of weeks since training began. Which statement is true about the model m of w? Okay, so let's see. We could get some values here. We could start with the first week and see if we can sense some trends. So let's do the first week, the second week, the third week, the fourth week, and the fifth week. Okay. So we put in the W, 1 for W, 2 for W, 3 for W, 4 for W, 5 for W. And what we'll get is 120 times 90 times 0.90 to the 1 minus 1, or 120 times 0.90 to the 0, which that's 1. Anything to the 0 power is 1. That's 120. And 120 times 0.90 to the 2 minus 1, that's 120 times 0.90 to the 1, or just 120 times 0.90. And we can put that right into the calculator. Yeah, 108. And then if we keep going here, 120 times 0.90 to the 3 minus 1, 120 times 0.90 squared. $97.2. And we'll just do 4 here because at this point you should be noticing somewhat of a pattern here. We're basically taking the previous value and just multiplying it by 0.90 again, because we've increased the W by 1, and therefore we raised the W to, the 0.90 to a 1 higher power. So 120 times 0.90 cubed, 87.48. We could have also gotten that by just doing 97.2 times 0.90. So we get 87.48. Again, we don't really need the last value here. This is just so we get an idea of what this model looks like. So we actually start by running 120 miles in the first week, and then a little bit less, and then a little bit less, and then a little bit less. So the first choice is the number of miles he runs will increase by 90% each week. Well, we can actually see, and this is where doing this little bit of modeling helps, that it's actually decreasing. So that's not right. And 2, the number of miles he runs will be 10% of the previous week. Well, 10% of the previous week, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense either, because 10% of 120 would be 12. That means we're really dropping quite a bit from 120 to 12, and we can see that we're not actually doing that. 3, m of w represents the total mileage run in a given week. Well, I believe that's what this question said. During the last few weeks of his training for an event, his mileage can be modeled by m of w is 120 times 0.90 to the w minus 1, and we were told at the beginning that he runs as many as 120 miles per week. Well, that would be in that first week. So this seems like a very sensible answer. 4 says W represents the number of weeks left until the marathon. Well, no, it literally says W represents the number of weeks since training began, so that completely contradicts the question. So the answer is choice 3. So this is somewhat of a tricky question because we have to pay attention to the fact that the numbers aren't increasing, but they also aren't decreasing to 10% of the previous week. They're decreasing by 10%. So in fact, if we were to take a look here, 120 minus 12 would in fact be 108, but that wouldn't be 10% of the previous week. That would decrease by 10% from the previous week. So we have to be very careful with the wording here. If you look at choices 3 and 4, they're relatively straightforward. We didn't even need this table for that. but the table certainly helps to identify that 1 and 2 cannot be the correct answers.